So it's exactly 4 o'clock. We'll call the meeting of the Comprehensive Wastewater Committee to order. Richard, thank you very much for joining us all the way from a foreign land. And we'll try to keep the meeting brief. We've got 3 items. Scott's on the line as well. But effectively, I guess since everybody's here, we can start with the agenda as posted, which is to initially look at the options for 95 Lawrence Road. We had been presented with 3 options. Option A is basically just doing an enhanced IA type system at 95 Lawrence Road. Option B is looking at a significantly enhanced on-site treatment system and adding the school, the fire department, and the police department into a combined system. And option C, or the third option, was looking at also adding part of the residential neighborhood into that system, because when you go to a cluster collection type system, you can build them modularly and you can add different loads as you go forward. And so the consultant looked at doing that and what the advantages would be, both from a cost standpoint, cost per kilogram removed. And I'm glad they did that, because the question for the wastewater committee was, first of all, do these systems make sense in Wellfleet, and if so, where? And if you do a system like this, how much can you remove, and what kind of a contribution would it make to the Mayo Creek, Duck Creek watershed, which in this particular instance is our worst watershed. It's, Scott said on many occasions, this is the one that's really keeping him up at night, because it's our densest area of the town, and it has the largest nitrogen removal requirement of any of our watersheds. So, and this isn't a comment about the housing project, because we all want the affordable housing project, but it also happens to be getting placed in the place where we have the worst problems. So, it is what it is, and I think we've got some great solutions and options for us. So we're ultimately going to mitigate any impacts that it would have. So the public, I think, can be very confident that this is going to be a project that will be a real feather in the cap of the town, not only from the housing standpoint, but also not impacting our wastewater situation. And so with that kind of background, Scott, are you unmuted, or are you hearing us? Maybe, maybe not.
He is unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
There we are. You're here, Scott. So with that, I'll turn it over to you if you kind of want to walk through each of the options. Did we lose him?
Oh,
He's still there. I'm assuming he's driving, so perhaps he's going to cut in and out a little bit.
Scott, can you?
how about now?
Can
you hear me now?
Yep.
A lot better?
Yep.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So as Kurt mentioned, this project is in our toughest watershed, Duck Creek, where we're trying to reduce the loading. And when the project as initially designed to include an I&A system, will still increase the nitrogen load to that bay. Bowler, the engineering firm, looked at the 3 options that Kurt just described, and by scaling up the project, 2 things happen. One is we get to a better treatment technology. For example, instead of charging at 19 milligrams per liter, which would be the INA system just for the housing project, we get down below 10 milligrams per liter. So it's at least twice as good in terms of treatment. The other benefit is we're taking some existing flows that are discharging at regular Title V, which is actually like 30 milligrams per liter, and we're able to reduce those all the way down to 10. So in that sense, by taking in the additional flow, we're compensating for the added flow, the new added flow for the housing project. And Bowler looked, as Kurt mentioned, they looked at 3 flows. One flow was at essentially 9,900 gallons per day. That would be just for the housing project. And then the next one up was about 20,000 gallons per day to include the municipal facilities that he described. Then the highest one was 30,000. I actually think they scaled it up to 35,000 gallons per day to include some contingencies. And in the second and third scenarios, we actually end up with a net reduction of nitrogen to Duck Creek. Kind of like a win. In those 2 scenarios, it's a win-win situation, meaning the town gets to build affordable housing in what is arguably the most sensitive watershed, and at the same time contribute to a improvement in water quality under scenarios 2 and 3. The other consideration and benefit is the efficiency. Goes up substantially in scenario 2 compared to scenario number 1. So, and that's really just, in a sense, it's partly because of economy of scale, but it's also because we're going to the more efficient treatment with the treatment plant. So I think that if the town would get behind either scenario 2 or 3, as I said, my view is that the town could have its cake and eat it too. They get the affordable housing project, as well as a net reduction in nitrogen. So that, I think, is the hope that we could do that. And the Bowler report does provide some cost savings. So, or excuse me, the cost information, so that we can calculate the the dollars per kilogram. And we did provide that information, Kurt. I think you have that. I should also mention that Tim Passakarnis at the Cape Cod Commission reviewed the same data and provided a similar finding. So I think we're all in concurrence. And maybe I'll just stop there and questions.
Yeah, and just for quick background, I think the Housing Committee's seen this, but the net dollars per kilogram removed at the lowest system size was about $520, and that's basically
per kilogram.
Yeah, per kilogram removed, compared with a standard Title V system. It drops to $178 per kilogram removed for the middle size system, and $148 per kilogram removed for the larger system. So, significantly more efficient and significantly lower cost for getting rid of that nitrogen. And as Scott mentioned, net removals in scenario 2 and 3 from the entire watershed. So, my only comment is that beyond that, I mean, the numbers look good, and that's great. My biggest concern, for this whole process is that it have, close to zero or almost no impact on the affordable housing project. I mean, if we're going to add complexity to this project, my view is that we've got to be looking to the wastewater committee of the town, our wastewater process, to figure out how that is going to square with bid documents that need to go out from the housing authority to potential developers, and that when a developer is ultimately awarded, that this process can be handled in a way that the developer is not really assuming any additional responsibility, that impact is absolutely minimized, and is not much different than if the developer were having to get a permit for a standard Title V system or whatever appropriate system would have been installed at the location anyway, so that we're not increasing cost or burden to the housing project. So, I just want to say those as caveats because I think that's something that we've got to figure out how to make that happen if we're going to move forward with a larger system. But, I'll kind of stop there because I'm sure other people will have things that they might want to add.
Can I just chime in one thing, Kurt? This is Hillary. We also received an amendment to the Bowler proposal that had language in it that would help us with the RFQ that goes out for folks to bid on, that sort of contemplates these options once we can select one. So a way to sort of make clear what we're trying to do in the proposal that goes out from the town.
The other thing we have to consider too is that I believe this will be the first time that the town has started down the road of wastewater management, and putting money where their mouth is. And am I correct in that?
More or less, yes.
So like if we collect all these different town facilities, we are now, meeting the requirements, starting to meet the requirements of our permitting process and showing.
Yeah, I would like to just comment on it if I may. I think that's a very good point. I think most of you know, my role is to consult with the town in developing this targeted watershed plan that we hope to get DEP, the state, to approve. We've had a number of meetings with them, including a recent one last week that went quite well. And I think it's fair to say that they will look very positively on this project if, in fact, it does get scaled up to include, one of these collection treatment systems. They will view this as a very legitimate step forward for the town in beginning to comply with the, their requirements under the Clean Water Act, which, as I said before, require reductions in loading to these bays, whereas the housing project alone, it represents a net addition and not a reduction. So I think I think it's a really good point that it's an opportunity, I think, for the town to take a step forward and to demonstrate that they are going to reduce this. So I think that's a really good point, and DEP will look well on it.
So, Rich, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
The only
Oh, go ahead, Fred.
There was another point I wanted to make too, is that this is also a proof of concept. Like first off, that these ANI systems work when you scale them up, and secondly, okay, well, if we can do that for this group of buildings and municipal buildings and homes, can we do it for others, and thereby start collecting, reducing nitrogen load in this wastewater, in this watershed and others.
Right.
Using this methodology and others.
I'll just respond to that quickly. Hillary and I actually had the same conversation the other day, and one of the challenges in doing cluster or aerial type wastewater systems is, generally speaking, you do not have the land area because of the number of the concentration of private properties. You don't have the land area to put.
Hey, Kurt, I got to call you back.
Okay, so that's one problem, and the other problem is that you generally don't have the density of loads either. So this is in my view, it's unique. Hillary probably has can add some perspective on that, but this is a tremendous opportunity from that standpoint, just because the land is there, the concentrations of wastewater loads are there because of our municipal buildings. So that's where you get kind of this win-win synergy. And it's not likely to be the situation that we're going to be able to replicate this very many other places in town. So this is a really unique opportunity. And Gary, you were going to try to.
Yeah, Kurt, Gary Sorkin from the 95 Lawrence Committee, or Task Force, I should say. So I just wanted to share with you the timing that we've been advised for the RFP and see if we can meld the interests of I for one, it would be fabulous if we could provide a wastewater solution that was better than our existing one or the IA system, but we've been advised by our consultant from MHP, Mass Housing Partnership, which is the state entity that's been working with us, that we should put out the RFP slightly after the first of the year. And the reason for that is that that's the window that developers have to answer the questions and still be in a position to submit requests for funding from the state. And most of the funding for the housing comes from what's called tax credits. If we miss that window, we may add a year to our process. So it's not like missing it by a month or two is just that effect. So I have this question. If we want to do this, what form would it take in terms of the town and town meeting and other initiatives and finding out about funding that we could do it in such a time frame to issue the RFP, let's call it January 15th, and still meet the requirements of the state housing funding as well as the developer response?
Well, I think we have two tools in our toolkit to be able to do that, Gary. Bowler does have an amendment that would provide some consulting services specifically to be able to modify the RFP to accommodate these needs. And we also have Scott to be able to, I think we need to do some creative thinking on management of the facilities. There's some other elements that you're going to want to have in the RFP. And I think we can do that in that time frame. I don't want to speak for Scott, but my impression is that, this isn't the first time that a public-private partnership of this type has been created. This isn't ridiculously complex. And the other thing is that the facilities themselves can be, they're modular in nature. So in other words, step one of, installation, permitting, et cetera, could just simply accommodate 95 Lawrence Road, addition of some additional equipment added to the location could accommodate the municipal buildings. And then thirdly, some additional equipment could be added to bring in additional loads from the neighborhood. So it's not like, and those components, because they're modular and separated, wouldn't impact the 95 Lawrence Road housing budget. So it wouldn't impact the developer. Those could clearly be segregated, to the public entity to make those financial contributions, and whatever other financial contribution the public entity needs to make with regard to the initial construction. So I think we can separate this financially and from a construction standpoint in a way that's not going to impact the project.
Kurt, do you envision this being an article at town meeting in an April timeframe, or how do you envision the town undertaking this?
Well, the municipal finance part is not in place. So clearly the town meeting would have to authorize financing for these additional components. However, putting the plan together by January and getting an RFP out, that doesn't obligate the town to a financial commitment.
Right, we agree. So we could include some vision statement about wastewater within the RFP now, similar to what we're doing in terms of providing adequate municipal water. Now that has passed, and we could do that within the RFP. And if circumstances change, we could deal with that. But I think that would be helpful to everybody if we had some clear vision of what we were doing and how we were doing it by the January 15th timeframe. Yeah.
And then there's a plan with modular components, and it's up to the town as to which components, if any, the town wants to pursue and finance.
I put down my hand.
Kathleen has her hand up, Kurt. I don't know if you can see that.
Who else?
Kathleen has her hand up as
Oh,
well.
and Kathleen, go ahead. If you wave your hands, I can see them too. So I can see everybody in the screen. So Kathleen, you're still on mute though. There you go.
Kurt, thank you for your comments. You've said everything basically I wanted to hear with concern, as to getting the RFP out in a timely fashion for the task force. And I'll give you a little bit of my background on this. In my 3 years on the select board, I realized the significance and the importance of the 208 plan and what a watershed permit would mean to the town of Wellfleet. We all met in the basement of the fire station a while back ago and had a very in-depth conversation with Scott Horsley on what was happening to that end. And to be honest, I agree with Fred in that I think the town has been doing lip service with regard to this problem. And to have a water treatment system, up there with regard to the housing would certainly take us a step further with regard to the state. But I am concerned. I'm concerned where it's going to be located. Originally, we had cited the ball field for our I&A system. Is this treatment system going to be able to site at that location? I have another question. Who bears the cost? Are the neighbors required to connect to the treatment system? Are they required to pay a cost in connecting like we do now with water? To get to Scott's thoughts about, the Duck Creek embayment, is it documented that 95 Lawrence Road and that area of Wellfleet is creating a nitrogen load to Duck Creek? I have not seen that documentation. And then the larger concern for me is Commercial Street and the Central District of Wellfleet, all of which we know are greatly affecting Mayo Creek and Duck Creek. So asking the town voters to pony up for a treatment system at 95 Lawrence Road, yeah, it might be a hard sell. Asking them to pony up for a treatment system that would take care of Commercial Street in the Central District, might be a better win. Those are my concerns about this. I have a hard time with the police station and the fire station connecting to a treatment system because both those buildings are brand new builds. They're brand new to the town. They've got brand new systems there. We're going to tell the voters that we're going to unplug those systems that we've already spent money on and then, have them pony up to a treatment system. I don't know if we can sell it. Those are my thoughts.
So a couple of quick comments. As far as footprint goes, we did look at that in detail. I don't know if Scott's back on, but there's more than enough area to handle all of the needs for for adding the municipal buildings and then adding part of the neighborhood within the existing footprint that we've been talking about on the ball field. So land area is not really an issue relative to the project. In terms of trying to add downtown or other areas of the town, at some point you move from being able to do a limited cluster type system to something that's significantly more complex in terms of now you've got substantially larger land area. And once you start to include those areas, you're really looking at something that looks more like a sewer system and you'd have to be pumping those loads most likely to the transfer station. Because in terms of an area within the town of Wellfleet that's going to be able to start handling those kind of loads, it's got to go someplace. So you're now looking at, that trenching, those pumping and the associated facilities, the transfers that go along with moving water out of the central district to that location. Your energy costs go way up. And that was something that came out of town meeting, which was the desire on the part of town to look at every single thing that the town's doing with respect to climate change and how to reduce and minimize energy consumption. So leaving this, confined to the project that we're envisioning here is definitely more energy efficient than anything else that we could be looking at.
Okay.
So I think on the climate change scale, it's a big plus. I hear you on the political side of, well, hell, if you can get some other taxpayers involved to perceive a benefit, it's going to help sell it. I can't say anything about that. As far as the fact that they've got new systems that they just built, thank God it's not private residences that did that, and we were coming along trying to propose the same thing. And that is a concern that we have. Somebody puts in a brand new Title V system and suddenly we've got, a cluster opportunity or some other wastewater solution that's coming right by their home, or they've, let's say even we're contemplating a Board of Health regulation change where a homeowner can put in an advanced IA system, potentially get some support from the town. And then in 10 years, if we, end up putting a sewer system line that goes by their house, do they have to connect and then lose that investment? Right. So that's always a big concern, Kathleen. And, I wish there were an easier answer, but at the end of the day, yes, those systems are new, but we're moving the loads, out of the watershed at a relatively small cost. So, it's not like we're digging up each of those locations and digging up each of their systems. We're simply adding a connection to those locations, and instead of the waste going into the Title V systems, it's just being moved to this enhanced treatment. So the incremental cost, it's not ridiculous. It does hurt that there's that sunk investment in the Title V that's in the ground, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
Elaine?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is, it was interesting for Kathleen to say, is there any documentation that a development at 95 would actually negatively impact? But it also sounds like an IA system might not fly for the project either, based on what Truro is going through with all the criticism of their wastewater system. So it's kind of sounding like we'd really have to prove an IA system would be adequate if that's what was going to happen. I agree the bigger system, if it can really benefit the town more holistically, is great. We do know that in Eastham, they had talked about including other buildings in their system for the Nauset Green project, but legally it turned out to be very, very tricky. So, that third option of adding neighborhoods could really, really be very, very difficult. So, option 2 kind of seems like that might make some better sense. And I'm concerned because I heard the school say that hooking up to the water was so expensive, that it wasn't an expense they couldn't incur. What will happen? What would be their expense in hooking up to the treatment system? And then if the town, and we don't have your recommendation, and I'm hearing where you're going with it, but if the town decides to go with the option 2 or 3, it has to be on the spring town meeting. A plan has to be in place by then, or as Gary said, we'll fall another year. We've already lost a year. We're going to fall another year behind. So it would be really important keep moving forward very quickly, you know.
Well, yeah, so a couple of things there. As far as the loads, you know, the septic loads in the area and whether 95 Lawrence Road will impact the watershed, yes, we know for sure. We know roughly what those loads would look like. And yes, the Mayo Creek, Duck Creek area is an area where we've got I don't have the spreadsheet right in front of me, but I can get you exactly how much nitrogen we need to remove from that particular watershed.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and I think it's around 2,000. It's around between 2,000 and 3,000 kilograms per year, and we just and 95 Lawrence Road would add load, not reduce it. So we know we've got to reduce the load no matter what. And that just means that we've got to reduce even more from something else. So for sure we know that there is a problem, and it's not 95 Lawrence Road isn't causing the problem. The problem's already there. That's just the nature of this problem. As far as the fact that it can be that we can that you guys could go forward with an RFP that envisions a system that could add additional loads at a later date means you really wouldn't have any financial impact in terms of what you're doing. And we would be able to finance, whether it's at this, Springtown meeting, at any time the town could come along and say, hey, let's put in module 2 for the 25,000 gallons load that now encompasses or adds the school, fire, and police. That could be done virtually at any time in the future. And the same thing with the third incremental load from the neighborhood. In other words, that's what I really like about what the consultant has told us and what Scott's been indicating to us, is we can actually separate these things with no impact on, they're not dependent upon each other. The only thing that is dependent on the whole project is to, use the initial technology that's being suggested, which is different than a Title V with a wood chip system, and that we need to know we've got enough land should those other components be added. So we're not trying to, we've now got houses someplace where we really need to have a wastewater component. And I think we've answered that question as well, that the modular nature, the land area being contemplated, all can handle this. So I think it may sound complicated at first, but I think because of the stages of adding the incremental pieces of technology, we can financially separate, and we can, from a construction standpoint, separate without any impact one on the other.
Can you share with the 95 Lawrence Task Force the wording that you got from Bowler, the suggested wording that could go into the RFP?
That's actually a component that they're working on now. As Hillary mentioned, they've got an addition to their scope of work to specifically work on that.
Okay. Can I chime in for 1 second, Kurt? This is Hillary.
Sure.
So the work from Bowler has to be completed, just in response to your timeline questions. The work from Bowler has to be submitted by the end of the year. So we will have all of the products from Bowler by the end of December, because that's the cutoff for the DLTA grant. The other piece of the puzzle with this is the regulatory changes that are coming down through DEP.
Right.
For groundwater discharge permitting, which may put you guys over the edge to listen to me drone on about it. But in short, we're not going to be able to add any sources of nitrogen to an impaired water body. And what DEP is considering is making all of Wellfleet Harbor nitrogen, designating it as a nitrogen sensitive area. So depending on when you start construction, I think chances are pretty good, and Scott can chime in if I'm wrong from what we heard from DEP, but this is coming sooner rather than later. So it would really be unfortunate if we're not planning to accommodate that and you get to a point where you're ready to start construction and then regulatorily we can't move forward. So that's real and that's happening. So I think that's another reason for us to sort of think of this larger scale system as we move forward.
Kurt, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
I apologize so much to everybody here. I really apologize, but I won't get into the details of why that happened. But anyways, I just want to pick up what Hillary said. I am serving on an advisory committee with Mass DEP right now, and she's absolutely correct. They are looking hard at this nitrogen sensitive area designation. And clearly where there is an MEP report that has been completed that they look at as documentation of these matters, I think she's right. I think Wellfleet Harbor will be one of many on the Cape and throughout Massachusetts that will be so designated, which is going to put a higher standard on future projects. So again, I agree. I mean, it would be too bad if we missed the opportunity to provide compliance to that with a project that is being teed up right now. I did hear a question earlier before I got disconnected, whether or not it's been documented that this site is within the Duck Creek watershed. And according to the MEP report, it definitely is. It's in the delineated embayment. That's the best available information that the DEP uses. So the project is clearly, that area is clearly contributing to Duck Creek, according to both USGS and Mass DEP and MEP studies. I don't know what else I missed, Kurt, but I'd be happy to try to catch up here quickly.
Go ahead, Gary.
There's a question. Okay, go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
Either Scott or Kurt, just to give you a time frame again, assuming that if we issue the RFP for the housing in January, you know, a projection would be that we'd be looking at occupancy in 3 to 4 years, allowing for response to the RFP and the funding and the permitting and the actual construction. So is that within the time frame that we could get something done on the wastewater solution?
Oh, yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gary, we did speak about this before, and it's a great question. And the one permitting difference here with the larger facility is a groundwater discharge permit with Mass DEP. Those generally take about a 1-year time frame. In some cases, we've been able to beat that as low as 6 months. In other cases, maybe 1.5 years. But a year is probably a good time frame. And about half of that is doing site work like test pits and hydrogeologic. So that's something that, frankly, the town could get going on sooner rather than later, because you know it's going to be required to expedite things. But I think a year is a reasonable time frame to get that permit.
And in terms of the cost, you mentioned modular, Kurt. So the cost to get it in a position to support 95 Lawrence, and you know, let's call it 45 units. What would that be? And then is there like a 2A, as if you will, that would also, then we could expand it to include municipal hookups, and then the 3 to hook up residential?
Yeah, the Boulder report does lay out costs for each one of those phases. And frankly, the largest single component of it is the collection system, the pipe coming down the road, I think is a little excess of $2 million, which would not be something in my mind that the developer of the housing project would be responsible for.
Right.
That would be something that the town, you know, the way I look at this is making this decision now and permitting it keeps an option open for the town. It does not commit them to doing anything.
Okay.
But it provides an option, and in my mind, would not be, you know, a responsibility of the housing developer. And so and the other thing is, all of these treatment systems that Bowler identified can be built in modular fashion. So in other words, you get the permit for the whole thing, the 30,000 gallons per day, but the developer for the housing project only builds phase 1, which is the part for the treatment plant, and then if and when the town decides, yes, this is a good idea, you've got the permit in hand and you can pull the trigger on that. My guess is, and I'll admit it's only a guess at this point, that this is probably more cost effective on a $1 per kilogram basis than the centralized sewer that we were talking about earlier, just because it's a much longer and bigger pipe to get out to the transfer station. And as Kurt said, that's a more complicated project. It may be worth doing. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but
this is in my mind, this is probably a good deal for the town in terms of a cost basis, because you've got Kurt and I were talking, it's almost like you've got an anchor store in a shopping mall. The housing project is going to build something. So because if you're going to make that commitment to add on to it and get the incremental marginal benefits, it's very cost effective. And I think that's why the numbers work as well as they do.
You know, and ultimately, just again to, you know, reiterate, the nitrogen removal rates for this system are the same as a central sewer system. So there's no nitrogen benefit to a central sewer system. It only adds additional pumping and energy costs and construction costs. So this is a beautiful thing.
Well, the other thing we've talked about is that it may be that the town might consider, if the town gets to the point where they need to treat more areas of the town using sewering, another option might be these neighborhood systems like this one. Find dense areas and build smaller cluster systems rather than one big system. And that's something that the town can look at as an option, just see which one is more cost effective.
And that's kind of why we were very, very excited that the Cape Cod Commission gave us this grant to be able to do this analytic work to answer that question. We just didn't know. And now we have that information. So I think we've learned a lot and really moved the ball down the field quite a bit as a result. The other thing I wanted to mention, Jan, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I've gotten a little bit confused now, because it sounds to me, because of these modular things, and you're saying the town doesn't really have to commit in the beginning, that it would then leave the developer with the full cost of the original module. And that is something that might just sink the whole plan, because that, if he had to bear that whole cost himself, I mean, I don't think anybody would want to do that.
Yeah, no, you want to clarify, Scott? I think what she was hearing was the cost of the pipe is one of the sewers.
No, it's not the pipe. It's
the treatment plant.
The treatment.
The treatment plant. Okay.
Well,
Isn't that going to be much more expensive than an enhanced septic system? Yeah, an INA.
It'll be a little bit more expensive in terms of permitting, because you have to get the discharge permit from DEP. And there will be some additional cost, but this would be a good question for Bowler, but I don't think it would be a dramatically different cost. And one option you might consider, the difference would be if they build the enhanced INA, or if they just build a regular INA, which I think the lowest cost one in that report was the Amphidrome system. That gets the town 19 milligrams per liter. If they build the higher treatment capacity, that would get them below 10 milligrams per liter. So it's about a 2-to-1. So another option could be that the developer, you know, commits to whatever the cost of, let's call it the base system. And it might be a really good investment on part of the town to subsidize it, to get it down to that 10, again, on a $1 per kilogram basis. That's probably going to be way less expensive than going out and doing other stuff. So it's possible you could do some cost sharing on this too, whatever the difference is, but that might be a good question for Bowler, Hillary, in their final. I don't know if they were going to do that or not, but to just identify the difference in cost between and maybe it's in their report now. I have to think back because they did do a cost of just the housing alone. But I think that the question you're asking is, what if they build, Jan, I think you're asking, what if they build the treatment system just for that alone rather than the INA? And I'm not sure they've identified that cost, but they certainly could. That might be something.
And you understand that we just do not want any extraordinary expense to sink our ship here. So that all has to be worked out somehow between now and the 15th of January. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask for clarification? Maybe I misunderstood. Initially, what I heard you say was that this would be a municipal system that would be paid for by the town and operated by the town, either directly or through a third party. Now you're talking about the developer. Yeah. Are you talking about the housing developer?
I am.
Right. See, perhaps there's a disconnect there between what I was hearing and what you were saying. So are you saying that this would be a municipal system, either operated and built by the town or by a third party that the town contracted with, and not by the housing developer, and that the responsibility of the housing developer would be to hook into, as it would be any municipal septic system, to pay for the hookup and whatever costs associated with the operation of that for the housing project?
Yeah, I think that's partly right. I think the developer, I agree with Scott, and I think we need some additional clarification here, but in my mind, what the housing project should be responsible for is the cost that the housing development would have borne for a system that's an enhanced IA system.
Right.
So that's the base cost.
Right.
So that's where we start. Anything over and above that, the incremental cost for an advanced treatment system that would be able to handle additional loads would be at the town's expense. Because in my mind, this is now then solving, because when you cross that threshold into the enhanced system, you're now removing nitrogen from the watershed. You've got a net benefit to the watershed, and the town needs to do that to comply with its wastewater removal requirements. So that shouldn't be borne by the private housing project. In addition to that, I think, Gary, you were trying to also get after, well, so in other words, the developer is still going to be contributing costs, or the project's going to be contributing costs to installing what needs to get installed, no matter what. After that, in my mind, again, operation is going to have to follow the town. We have to have, the town by law has to have a responsible management entity that oversees its wastewater management plan. So the town has to have something in place. And again, as you said, whether it's the town specifically itself or through a subcontractor to manage and operate that wastewater treatment facility. Does that help?
Yes, I think we're on the same page, Kurt. Is that obviously there's a cost associated with managing wastewater for this project, regardless of the methodology. And that should be borne by the developer, but it can't be so heavy as to make the project financially unfeasible, and in which case we won't get any responses to our RFP. But assuming that there is a third-party entity, whether the town or somebody they contract with, that owns and operates this and provides a service, as it were, to 95 Lawrence and any other people hooking up to it, I think that's a vision that we could certainly live with. I don't know how others see it.
Yeah, no, I think as a matter of law, we have to do it that way.
Yeah.
Richard?
Well, how do you get a commitment from the town to pay its share without a town meeting and still have it done before January 15th?
Well,
Can I take a shot at that, Kurt?
go ahead.
So what we could do is include that language that Bowler will suggest in the RFP that we're issuing for the 95 Lawrence project. Our assumption is here's the vision. It's going to be a third-party wastewater system that the housing project will have to hook up to. If in the course of things it isn't passed by town meeting, if things change for whatever reason, we'll have to go back and relook at that. And we actually have now, right, in Truro is exactly what they're doing, is that they had proposed one wastewater solution. The town had awarded the contract for the housing, and now they're going back and renegotiating based on, any number of factors. And I could see us doing that, because the worst case scenario would then be, we'd be back to perhaps a standalone IA system in the short term and a bigger solution down the line. No worse off than we would have been otherwise.
Exactly. And the other thing I think that that makes clear in the process, Gary, is that if the town didn't support the expansion, we're now really not complying with 208.
Right.
I mean, the town's got an obligation here. We can't keep kicking that can down the road.
Right.
Jim, we have heard two questions, Jim Hood. Is there anything in the water system that we could piggyback on that would offset any costs associated with this, number one? And number two, we did actually hear a story the other day about Easter had gotten a MassWorks grant for some infrastructure and needed to expand it for wastewater, some amount of wastewater capability, and that they got an actual increase in the wastewater, in the MassWorks grant to do that. Any possibility, Jim, of our leveraging what's going on already?
Well, you know, we haven't heard anything back from
Obviously, right.
with regard to our application. So, and I really can't speak to the issue of if there would be anything in there, at least in what we've provided to them up to now. It's really only with respect to the installation of the new water main that would allow us to move ahead with the Lawrence Road project.
So Gary, I think the quick answer would be that we'd have to do a new MassWorks grant for the septic component, for the sewer component. I actually had a conversation with Mike Travato the other day talking about this specifically, and it would be a new MassWorks grant application and or a USDA application. So USDA has done funding for these. We could also be going after SRF funding and potential grant funding from a couple of other sources. Cape Cod Water Protection, Association, which is the new municipal fund, could potentially provide grant funding. And in our meeting with DEP, this came up, and they were very interested in seeing if they could find EPA sources or other sources. So
Right.
absolutely, we're going to, beat all the bushes to get grant funding for it. But at least, as we're conceiving of it right now, again, I think the town has to do something. We can't kick the can down the road. I think we have a way from a financial perspective and from an operational perspective to get this to happen without, negatively impacting the 95 Lawrence Road project.
Right.
Hi,
Go ahead,
Kurt, it's
Kathleen.
Kathleen. I've got to go shortly, but Kurt, I just want to add a couple of things. I think having Hillary tell us that, DEP is going to be changing up these regulations sooner than later really gives us an incentive, to push, for as much as we can do with regard to wastewater. So on that note, I'm going to support your committee's recommendation to the select board. It's kind of like, let's say we're going to do it and we'll figure it out as we go along. The other thing I want to say through you, Kurt, to Gary, Sorkin, and Elaine, I've heard it on a very good source close to the Cloverleaf project in Truro. They might be telling you it's about wastewater, but the issue there is something other than that that's slowing up the project. It's not wastewater. Trust me on that. They've had a lot of discussion. They've got everything in place, and there's something else happening that's slowing up that project. Possibly the site, the highway. I don't want to go into more than that, but I don't want to. I don't want to compare ourselves to the classism that we're witnessing in Truro right now. So I have to go, everybody. Thank you for this great meeting, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kathleen. Anyone else, Elaine?
Well, I guess I'm just curious about what you will be bringing to the select board.
What they've asked us to do is recommend either option A, B, or C.
Mhm.
So, quite simply, we would have a motion along those lines.
Okay.
but we definitely, we wanted to make sure we got all the input from housing, because I'm extremely sensitive to what your needs are.
Well, I agree. It looks like there is an opportunity, a lot of work to put all the pieces together. But it seems like in terms of, climate change and the need to clean up that system, and the fact that doing something like this could lend extra strength to looking for funding and doing it seems positive. So I'm not sure that you have made, well, if you're bringing an actual hard and fast recommendation Tuesday night, or are you just going to talk to them about the thoughts right now?
I mean, what they've asked us for is really just a recommendation on, A, B, or C. So small system, medium system, or large system.
When I hear you talk about the modular, that almost seems like not another animal completely, but we hadn't looked at that possibility and capacity when we talked about it before. So
the other thing I'd like to add is that I think because this is a unique situation, and because there's so much interest from a variety of different standpoints to see this larger system happen, the town has to do something. I think we've got a much better chance of getting grant funds, because it's a very innovative solution to get affordable housing done. So I think it's got a few bells and whistles that's going to make it very attractive for grant funding, which ultimately could reduce the cost of the 95 Lawrence Road project.
Yeah,
I don't want to promise anything, but I'm just saying.
Kurt,
it's a very nice package here. So, there's a chance that this could actually be significantly beneficial.
Kurt, if I could just add two quick things.
Sure.
I agree. There have been many housing projects around the state that have collided with water quality issues. It's been a very common, tension between these projects, because by their nature, they're high density. And as they say, the easy pieces of land to develop are kind of gone. So we're all trying to find sites that all have constraints. So I think having a story like this, where the town can create affordable housing and not only minimize impacts, but improve water quality through a restoration project, is a really nice story. And I think it's one that the state and probably EPA would be very interested in getting behind. So I think all that plays well for a grant application. And I'm more than happy to help assist the town in trying to pitch something like that. Kurt identified a number of funding sources, and they are out there. But I think it is a very good story to tell. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Anyone else?
I would just chime in, this is Hillary, that again, this is sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity for Wellfleet to actually move forward in protecting, our valuable resources. And I don't think that needs to be told to you guys, but there aren't many parcels of land where we're going to actually be able to do something like this. So we've looked tirelessly across town to find parcels of land that make this sort of cluster system, wastewater treatment plant available. And there just are not many opportunities. And to think we have municipal buildings that we could hook up as well easily. It's a perfect solution to some of our problems, and it's exciting. And I don't want us to lose sight of that like we frequently do here in town, because it is super complex and we do need to work out a lot of issues. So I'm glad you guys are on board. I think it's important that we investigate it to, the fullest capacity and see that we can make this happen if it is possible. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a good opportunity for Wellfleet.
And I'd just like to say, and I don't mean to disagree with you, but I am, Hillary, is that I don't think it's super complex. If you're going to put in affordable housing, you have to put in some kind of septic, right? Septic systems are not, from an engineering point of view, are not that complicated, okay? And if you have the land, you you can put in huge septic systems, you know, and that's basically what we're doing here. And we've even set it up in a modular format. I think the complexity, you know, is going to come from the, you know, is how do we fund this, you know, but the engineering is pretty straightforward.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Jay.
I just want to jump on something that Jan said, which is mainly my concern, that when we put out this RFP, we're not going to put in anything that's going to scare away potential, you know, developers. So that's a concern that I have. But aside from that, you know, I'm all on board. You know, and as long as the kids, when it's all done, as long as the kids can still play baseball.
Kurt, are you looking for a vote from the board?
Yeah, I am. I just wanted to make sure if anybody else had any other comments before we start looking at a motion. But Hillary, is there anybody else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm monitoring this, and I don't know if I have any standing at this meeting, but I'd like to comment on a couple of things.
For the record? I'm sorry, could you identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, this is Dave Bennett at Bennett Environmental in Brewster.
Sure.
I just really wanted to say a couple of things that may have been missed here that Scott brought up, and I think are very important to your decision. Not all wastewater treatment systems are the same, and larger systems, not IA technology, do afford greater nitrogen reductions and more economical incentives based on scale, which I think was pretty clear here. I do believe that, you know, the company that we are now affiliated with, there are private parties that will contribute in a private-public partnership, which this sounds ideal for, where you can offset the cost of the treatment plant entirely for the fees that would be gathered in the future. So at some point, I would like to engage in part of that discussion because that is something that we have definitely shown an interest in and would like to further discuss that with Scott and Kurt if it's appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's David, we'd love to engage in those discussions. I think it's financing the system at this point is a little premature till we get some agreement on what we want to pursue and get the parties that are most affected in some kind of an agreement. But yeah, financing for sure. And clearly you offer an innovative financing option, both for the developer and for the town.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think that money is the big issue here, and it is the major player. It's the kind of the elephant in the room. But you know, at some point, I would like to have that discussion only because you know, if there is a groundwater discharge permit that's required, then this satellite concept serving a much larger area and addressing the comprehensive wastewater management objectives it is a dialogue that may actually be ahead of the housing project because you want to kind of figure this out so that there's not uncertainty with the developer.
Great. Anyone else, Hillary?
Not that I see. I see no raised hands and no one waving.
Okay. Anyone want to try to take a stab at a motion? Richard?
Move we go for the whole Megillah. I move that we recommend to the select board that that the town put in the RFP for the housing project a stage system that will accommodate up to 35,000, which is the largest size, knowing that it doesn't require it to be fully built out at any time.
Is there a second? Fred, you're on mute.
Second that one, yeah.
It's a terrible motion, I know, Fred, but.
Well, no, I mean, like, the thing is that, if we, I mean, I second it because our ultimate goal is to get if it's A, B, and C, our ultimate goal is C. But so let's just like as Richard said, let's go for the whole Megillah, with the understanding that A or B will meet the male, or I would say B or C will meet the male. I think the issue with A is that I don't know if we're going to be able, that as Scott astutely said, is that when you're putting in these housing complexes, these dense housing complex, and we can't increase the load on this already challenged, the Duck Creek.
So is this a long second or a short second?
So anyway, my bottom line is yes. I mean, this is a long second. I said.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I think the intent's clear, that we're recommending that the board pursue the large system. Thank you very much, Elaine, Gary, Jim, Jay, Jan,
Keep us
Steve,
in the
and
loop.
everyone else. Really appreciate your comments, and I'm grateful that you came, because there's nothing like quite getting firsthand information about this. It is very complex, and I just appreciate that you took the time to join the meeting.
Yeah, and if
Thank
can
you
keep
and
us-
everybody on the committee. I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, if you can keep us in the loop on all this, we need to be as well informed as anybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So our next
Forward to
agenda.
years of working together.
Exactly. So the next item we've got on the agenda is to talk about the revised Board of Health regulation. I'll read it because I think everybody's received it already, but just to be clear, the initial part of the recommendation or the regulation is 608. That hasn't changed. That's basically the use of nitrogen reducing systems is required for all new repairs and upgrades within the Wellfleet Harbor Embayment System watersheds as identified by the Mass Estuaries Project. Nitrogen reducing systems are defined as those rated at 19 milligrams per liter nitrogen. 609 is the same language that we had before with regard to offering a $10,000 grant or tax exemption for systems that get down to 10 milligrams per liter. What's kind of new here is 610, which the Board of Health had asked us to come back with, which is a clause that would protect anybody who took advantage of putting in an enhanced system and not necessarily require them to connect. And what Scott's got for language at the moment is any property owner who has installed an alternative septic system less than 10 years prior to an order to connect may, upon approval by the Board of Health, defer connection to town sewer to allow them to utilize their alternative septic system for a total of 10 years from the date of issuance of the certificate of compliance for said system. If the property is transferred during that time, the property shall be connected to the public sewer at the time of transfer. And he pulled that straight from the town of Chatham language. So anyway, that's the draft language. How do people feel about that?
I'll just add, Kurt, and Hillary may want to jump in here too. We did have a good discussion with the Board of Health, and thank you for clarifying that. Last language is directly from Chatham, and the 10 years could be 20 years or it could be forever. That's really up to the town. So please don't get hung up on that 10 years. That's just what I found in that regulation. But the intent here would be, if in fact a central sewer does get built at some point, that you're not going to double tax or double cost people who have just upgraded to one of these systems. And frankly, as Kurt said before, these new systems, and we're going to have a presentation next week at the Board of Health meeting, seem to perform just as well as a centralized treatment plant. So I don't know why you'd ever, frankly, require them to connect unless it was less costly on an operation and maintenance basis. But that 10 years is something that's clearly up for grabs. So please don't get hung up on that.
What's the life of a new IA system?
Well, I mean, the basic parts of the system, the septic tank and leach field don't change, although actually that's not true. These new INA systems, specifically the one we're looking at, the nitro system, has a much lower solids and BOD loading, which means the leach field's probably going to last a lot longer because it's not going to get burdened. So I don't know. I would defer to Hillary on the average age of a leach field in Wellfleet, but I would suggest that with these INAs, it's actually going to be increased because of the level of treatment. There will be there's obviously operation and maintenance in the case of the nitro system, which is the one we're looking at most. It has wood chips in it, and those wood chips do need to get replaced. I've been talking with John Smith, the owner, about that, and he's guessing that it might be on the order of 10 years or so. We'll hear more about that next week at the Board of Health meeting. It is relatively easy and pretty inexpensive to do that replacement, but that is something that would have to happen on a, some sort of a basis.
George, I asked George Hoyfelder the same question, and he thinks actually you get the wood chips get into a state of equilibrium, and based on some of his other work, he's not sure that. He thinks it might be a lot longer than that. And he's pretty knowledgeable on these things. So I think somewhere between 10 and something significantly more than that might be the wood chip replacement year or date. But either way, it's relatively inexpensive. And as Scott said, if you're protecting the leach field, that's the most expensive part of the system.
And this is also kind of getting to this section about the 10 years. But the question I have is, did Chatham put in a sewer system, and has this part of their Board of Health regulation been tested?
Has it been tested? You mean challenged legally?
Well, not tested. Like in other words, has someone put an ANI system in?
I see what you mean. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that, Fred. That's a good question. I can try to find out.
But
I mean, it seems to me like 10 years seems like a reasonable amount of time. I'm just kind of going, okay, well, let's think about a normal Title V system. You're supposed to pump it every 3 years, right? It's
yeah.
I don't know if that's expected of these ANI systems. You've got to put wood chips in every 10 years. So it's sort of like, okay, I put in a new system, and then we soar the place, 5 years later, you still got 10 years on your ANI system. Seems like a long time, but
well,
I don't know if there's any science going along with it.
10 years from the initial certificate that you can use it. It's not 10 years from when you can first hook up, right?
Right. No, they wrote it, and I'll tell you, what the background is on their language is that they wanted to be able to get those systems off and get them connected to the sewer because they wanted the revenue. So they wanted something that appeared to protect the homeowner, but if you notice, the language actually says from the date that the system got permitted, not when the sewer system got put in. So it's 10 years from the date of the original permitting. So if the sewer system got put in, and 8 years later, you only have 2 years left.
Again, I think this is something that the town Wellfleet can pick whatever they want to on this. I don't see this as a huge.
No, I just kind of, my feeling is that, just to be blunt about it, these systems are going to perform at the level that a sewer system does. I think we could protect the homeowner that if they're using an advanced IA system that meets less than 10 milligrams per liter, as long as that system continues to perform, we should not be requiring them to hook up.
Yeah, that's the best thing politically. Give them the option to hook up if they want to.
They can hook up. It just wouldn't be a requirement.
Right.
It just wouldn't be. They wouldn't be forced. Which is kind of how
the option to go to the Board of Health to request that extension. So, that's an important part of the regulation, that it just lies with the Board of Health. So if the numbers aren't working, then the Board of Health can say, hook up to the sewer. And if the numbers are working, then the board can extend it for another 5 years and then they come back for review, or it really lies with the Board of Health.
Yeah.
Right, but I do think, Hillary, we don't want to make it onerous on the homeowner or different than what you'd kind of be doing with a septic system. I mean, they'll have an O&M requirement for the system anyway. So I think, as long as they're in compliance with that. I mean, what's your feeling? I mean, you're the regulator, so I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, that's what I'm saying. As long as it's in compliance, there's no reason to change it. But if they come before the board and they're not in compliance, then they get the change order.
Okay,
If they're in
thank you.
compliance, they're in compliance. There's no reason to change what they're doing.
Right. So could you somebody make a suggestion on language? Because I'd like to, get that language in here and we could have a motion on it.
I can make that language change in time for the meeting next week. You mean for right now, you mean, Kurt, for motion? I'm sorry. Well, I think
we can make a motion with amended language. Yeah, we can make a motion that you'll draft amended language that incorporates the ideas.
I got you. Yep, I'm sorry. Misunderstood.
Yeah, no. I mean, either way, unless Richard or Fred has some language they want to pull out and.
Well, I think what Hillary's saying is don't put the 10 years in there or put a number in, but leave it up to the Board of Health to make the final decision, right?
Well, I think what she's saying is as long as the system is in compliance, they wouldn't be coming before the Board of Health.
Right.
So
If they have to. Go ahead, Richard.
It wouldn't even be a 10-year rule. It'd simply be as long as the system is in compliance, they wouldn't have to hook up.
Right.
Correct.
So we could just take the.
So I'll move that language to be revised by somebody so that it can be inserted into the bylaw.
Regulation.
Essentially, the language that would allow a system in compliance not to hook up until it's not in compliance. An advanced IA system, enhanced IA system.
Right, and not be required to hook up to a sewer system.
Okay.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Can we just put a reminder out that the Board of Health is meeting next Wednesday at 5 o'clock? So
and we are invited. Hillary did send the Zoom link for that meeting. It would be great if we had a quorum of our board at that meeting as well. So,
Hillary, when did you send that?
I actually had asked Rebecca to post a meeting of the Wastewater Committee and to notify you guys. So I don't know if you've actually all been notified. I had also needed to alter our group email, and I don't know if that has been done yet. So I think I only actually sent it to Kurt to send to the committee members.
Okay, I'll forward. Yeah, I'll forward that along if I've got it.
And Hillary, I just want to confirm the 5 o'clock time because we did have it at 3 p.m.
Yes, we had to change the time because one of our members had a prior commitment.
That's fine. That's fine. I just want to make sure. Thank you. And I'll let John Smith know that as well.
Yes, I asked Rebecca to notify him as well and send him the agenda and the link.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Richard and Fred, for your benefit, what Scott's talking about there is John Smith is going to be available at the Board of Health meeting to talk specifically about a system. So that'll be, I think that'll be helpful.
Should be
the other quick update, Kurt, we might give to the rest of the board, the rest of the committee here is on the financing discussion we had with the county. I don't know that we've had that discussion on the wastewater committee.
No, go ahead.
So I'll give a real brief, and again, Hillary, you can jump in here, but we had a very good call with the people at the Barnstable County Health Department. Sean O'Brien, the director, Brian Baumgartel, who's running the test center, and Jack Units, the county administrator. And they are very interested, I think it's fair to say, in gearing up a little bit and providing this so-called responsible management entity service to the town and other towns that want to get into this program. And they are also quite interested in expanding their current financing program, which right now just goes to upgrade standard Title V systems that have failed to finance these enhanced INA systems. And right now that's a 20 years. I think it's at 5%, but they're confident they can get it to either 2% or 0% financing. So they're going to get back to us. But I think Hillary, you can please jump in, but I think that's essentially what I heard. And I was quite optimistic that they're going to help. And the other thing I'll just throw in is I asked them, is your financing and assistance on both the private side, meaning the landowner's costs of upgrading, and possibly the town's $10,000 subsidy? And he said, yes, we could probably finance both sides of that. So that's pretty interesting as an option, I think, if it works out.
So the finance. Go ahead, Fred.
So I just want to hear that again. In other words, they'd pick up the tab for the additional 10,000 on your basic savings. Okay.
No, they would finance it. They could provide so it's a figure 20 years at 2%.
Okay. Okay.
So they could finance to the town, or right now the financing goes to homeowners.
Oh, so but they can
clearly
finance the town.
Yeah, I mean, right now I think what I'm thinking is it's about a $10,000 subsidy from the town and maybe a $10,000 to $15,000 cost for the landowner for excavation, landscaping, etc. Yeah. And so there's two costs, and it sounds like their program could finance either or both, which was pretty interesting, I thought.
So in other words, so for example, if the homeowner had to pull out a loan for 15 grand to put in a typical Title V, and the town is going to throw in 10 grand to make it, an advanced INA system, right? Yep. This would finance the town and the homeowner.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what it sounds
25.
Like.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's great. Someone's making money there, but I don't know who it is.
Well, and I was just going to say the financial piece definitely isn't my strong suit. And during the conversation, I was more interested in the county sort of taking over management of the systems and operation and maintenance.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the more difficult parts for me to wrap my mind around, is that if we have these systems all over town, we need a consistent monitoring and maintenance program. And it seems like Jack Units from the county is given some thought to sort of bolstering up Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment's wastewater division to accommodate this. Thus, we could make them part of our RME moving forward, and that fits into our watershed management plan. And I did talk that over with Brian Dudley, who's equally as interested in that and thinking that it's a really great idea. So I think if we could do both of these things, it would really be trend setting for Cape Cod and really help all of Cape Cod. And at the same time, I've had some conversations with Truro, who's going through this cloverleaf project and getting some pushback on wastewater. And they recently got a letter from an abutter. I don't know if he's a doctor or a scientist, but a pretty in-depth letter. And so Emily and I have been talking about Truro going along with these regulations as well. And she was equally as excited to hear that the county could step into this role. So it would really be great if Truro and Wellfleet were sort of leading the charge on this whole concept of these advanced IA systems, because it's fascinating.
And I'll just make, if I may, Kurt, one more comment. And I apologize, but I'm very excited about this. You know how they say timing is everything? Well, I think, I don't know if you've all heard, but there's a new lawsuit. Conservation Loss Foundation is suing the towns of Barnstable and Mashpee.
They are moving forward on that now. There was rumors, but
no, it's happening. It's happening.
They did file.
And at the Title V Advisory Committee meeting earlier this week that I was on, Gary Moran, who's Deputy Commissioner of DEP, reported in on this nitrogen sensitive area issue that Hillary brought up earlier. And that was his prime thing. He said, we need to make a move on this. We've been needing to do this for a long time, but now we're getting sued. So, and he said it in a very positive way, which I thought was good. He wasn't opposing the lawsuit. I think he probably believes that, these guys, DEP's way late on this. And so it's good timing. And that's why I think the Wellfleet, I think you're right, Hillary, if you're the one that said it, that you guys could really lead the charge here at really a perfect time by doing this, because I think DEP is going to like it. Barnstable County's on board with it, and it's very consistent with the pending lawsuit. So it's good timing.
And it's going to make a difference on our watersheds, so and our environment, which is, you know, the most important part. So it's exciting. You should all be excited.
We are. Do you see how much muck they're pulling out with the dredge?
I did check that out this week.
Well, anyway, we got to keep that from happening in the future. So that's kind of a segue, Scott, to you've partly covered, I think, what we're starting to get on the DEP update for everybody as our last agenda item here.
Yep.
But I don't know. Do you want to, Hillary? Do you want to kind of give a brief update on what you think happened there?
This is at our DEP meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can give an update. I just have to remember what happened. There are a lot of really important people. We talked a bit about Herring River, which was interesting, and how we need more data on nitrogen in Herring River to provide to the state and modeling for TMDL review. That was one part of the conversation. We talked about the Main Street intersection and getting DEP to sort of help us there with the culvert that Mass DOT and DEP put in that cut off flow to House Pond. Millie talked about funding for PRBs and trying to locate us some funding that she had heard about several months prior from EPA. So she was going to work on that.
Hey, Hillary, let me jump in on that one because I have another update, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, so the PRB project that we've been talking about at the intersection of Bank and Commercial as a pilot, she was very interested. She actually asked me during the meeting, what would it cost? And I kind of, off the top of my head, said $200,000 to $300,000 as a guess. And since then, I've looked at a couple of other pilot projects, including one that was just built down on Long Island, and it was about $300,000. So that's the right number, I think. She didn't seem to blink at all when I said that, and she kind of said she's going to go look for the money. And so I thought that was pretty good. And Hillary, since then, I had a very good conversation with this gentleman from EPA, Marcel Bellevue, who is their lead PRB guy, and he's offering to provide some technical assistance on the project. So that one's looking pretty good. And
is the $200,000 or $300,000? Is that because there's all the monitoring and stuff that we have to do?
Yeah, that would be a good estimate for permitting. Well, actually,
good question, Fred.
Permitting, construction, and monitoring.
Because from my perspective, I'm like going, you're digging, you're moving in there and pouring vegetable oil in there, $200,000
or wood chips.
That job all day long, you know. But I'm like going, okay, there's something else going on. There's got to be there to jack the price up that high.
I mean, you got to get the design right. There's a lot of site characterization you got to do first, some wells and monitoring and whatnot. Then you got to design the thing, installation. I'll give you guys, I have a presentation from this one on Long Island that I can show you at a future meeting. I'll send around to give you a better idea what's involved. But it is a little more complicated than it seems at first glance. I agree with you. It sounds like a pretty simple thing, but start digging trenches down along Commercial Street in the tidal zone, it gets complicated.
It's also the Long Island price, Fred.
That's right.
That's another good point. I'm sitting here going,
It's not the Wellfleet price. That's the Long Island price.
That's the Long Island price. Okay, yeah. Well, that'll just, turn that down by 50%. I think we can do it.
But Hillary, I interrupted you. Were you going to say something else about the meeting?
No, I was trying to recall what else we spoke about. I think we talked at great length about Herring River because they had Patty Kellogg there. And also it was the first meeting that EPA participated in with us, and EPA did give us a commitment that they will continue to participate in our watershed meetings with DEP. So I think that's important because then they're hearing firsthand what we're actually doing. We also covered the housing 95 Lawrence Road project a bit, and they were encouraged by that. So I think, that was one of the high points of the meeting. And we talked a bit about the IA regulation for Board of Health. So they were really on board for all of our ideas. And I think it was actually a really good meeting. It was productive, and they were very supportive of everything that we're doing and sort of encouraged us to move faster and start writing our watershed permit. So like, stop talking about it and just move on already. So, and I think that was the marching order they gave us. And so Scott is working on drafting.
I am.
And, we're moving ahead, and all of these components will be in our plan. I don't know, like I say to Kurt, you know, pretty much every week, I'm really encouraged as to where we are right now. It's taken 15 years to get to this point, but I think we're like almost at the finish line, if that's possible. And so I know people ask me like, do you look for other jobs, or, you know, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm fairly committed to seeing this through before I can like look to go somewhere else. So, so I don't know. I think we're getting there is the bottom line.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We also did, we did talk about the infiltration study that GHD is doing at the transfer station. That was the only other item that came up. But they, you know, from my perspective, you know, I asked the question at the end of the meeting if they felt we should be doing something different and how they felt about what we were proposing. And everybody was very, very strongly supportive. EPA, DEP, and well, the commission, you know, the commission would support anyway, but we didn't get any negative, we didn't get any pushback like we have been for some time from, you know, from certain members. So I was very encouraged.
So, do we have anything else on the agenda? Because
No.
I got to get going soon. So
Yep.
just,
Richard has a real appointment. His girlfriend's got a big birthday, and he's taken the time out on her birthday day to attend this meeting. So yes, we need to wrap up. Anybody have anything else?
No.
Gail? I see Gail's iPhone there. Gail has been in dutiful attendance. Is she unmuted?
I just asked her to unmute.
Oh, okay. No, I guess she.
No, I think Gail's good.
Okay, great. Anyone want to make a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Fred? Second, all those in favor. Thank you, everybody. That was a great meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.